gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I had a little something there, probably because I was trying to scarf down some dinner before the show. It is pre-lock. It is Sunday Night Football. It's Dolphins. It's Eagles. This is a big game. I am very excited to talk about this one as we get started. I'm joined by one of my Sunday co-hosts. His name is TJ Zwarych, and he's from Agents of Fandom, his own personal side gig. TJ, so excited to have you come on. We've been doing shows together now for a little bit, so we're pretty acquainted with each other, and so I'm definitely excited to come on and talk about this game, get your thoughts, get your feedback, talk a little strategy, and ultimately, let's win, baby. Let's win. How are you doing? And welcome.
Doing pretty well. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I remember years ago listening to the Morning Grind and just hearing you and Stevie bantering back and forth and going, you can tell they're not just co-hosts, they're friends. I'd love to work for that site and be friends with those guys one day. And I feel like we're there now, Chief. We've done so many shows together. Maybe not you and Stevie, you've put in some time, but we're friends. We're friends now, not just co-hosts. And it's nice. It makes these shows a lot more fun. Had a pretty good day today. Was overweight on Mahomes, overweight on Lamar Jackson. So going to be coming out on top. No crazy wins. Had a few sweats, but Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler, those guys just let me down a little bit. But ready to dive into tonight's slate because this is so much fun. We've had so many games over the last bit that have just been like either huge spreads or two crappy teams. And like
snooze
fest. We finally got what should be a great high-scoring football game.
Yeah, let's hope we see some scoring back and forth. I will say, just to kind of take it back to the afternoon stuff, the Chiefs-Chargers, if you didn't watch the game, you probably thought, oh, man, what an exciting affair. It was exciting in the first half. Second half was a bit of a drag. Didn't quite I think explode the way everyone felt. But nonetheless, it still ended up being a 31-17 game, I think it was, in terms of the actual points. The Chargers, once again, man, let me say this before we get into the showdown, a little bit of real-life football. I think Brandon Staley might be out. If they don't fire him before the season is out, I definitely think he's gone this year. Like, this season is going downhill fast, and they're not winning any games to comp for all the bad play calling and different things we're seeing with the Chargers. It's just too much talent on this team for them to not have more success. So with that being said, let's move to a team that has been having some success, and that's the Miami Dolphins, led by none other than Coach McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa at the helm. And tonight they're going into Philly, into the cold. Might not be as cold as it would be, say, in late December, but it's still not going to be the same environment that they see in Miami. How are you feeling about the game overall, the flow of the game? What can we anticipate in terms of scoring? I know the sports books are thinking this game is probably going to explode a little bit, but we've also seen some of these primetime games really take a hit in the scoring. Are you on bandwagon unders today, or are you thinking we're actually going to see the shootout that we're supposed to?
So I put in the expert survey today that I think this will be the highest scoring game of the season. The Dolphins have had one where there's been 90 points put up. I thought there's going to be 93 points put up in this one with my pick was, I believe, 48-45. So that was like my hot take was like your bold prediction is that this was going to be the highest scoring game of the year. And so I wouldn't say like, hey, go bet all your money on alt overs over 80 points today. Nothing like that. But I do think this one's going to go over, and I think there's going to be some points.
Absolutely. And I like that call. I definitely think we will I definitely think we'll see some points here. These are two, let me say this. The Dolphins are a high-powered offense. I think what the public wants to see and what analysts want to see and what other football teams and coaches want to see is, can they pile on the points against a team that we're going to consider to be equal footing? Now, they went up into Buffalo and lost that game, but we've seen Buffalo struggle 2 weeks in a row against the Giants, against the Patriots. We've seen them struggle. We've seen the Eagles have nice games, but kind of struggle a little bit, right? In certain points of the game, as in last week, losing to the Jets. Do we see the Dolphins finally come into town against a contender and really lay the hammer? How are they going to lay the hammer? I think it starts with Tua Tagovailoa. We've got him at $10,600 on DraftKings. I think he's the ultimate flex play. I'm not saying that. I actually don't think I'm going to have any Tua in the captain for what it's worth, because I think I'm going to reserve that for some of these big wide receivers. But in terms of the ultimate flex play, I really like Tua tonight. He's expensive. We do have him projected. Last I checked, was around 47.
Let me push back on that a bit while you still have some time to potentially change your mind, because Tua, to me, is, while I agree with you, that was my initial first thought too. He's going really under-owned at the captain position today. Like, he's going to be single-digit ownership at the captain position, which all it would really take for him to get there is for the Dolphins to put up a bunch of points and not all of the touchdowns going to Tyreek Hill. Them just getting spread out a little bit. It's just, we're projecting him for 8% ownership, both the RG projections and the blitz. That just feels too low considering Tyreek's going to be double and Jalen Hurts is going to be almost triple.
Yeah, no. I agree with that. There's a method to my madness here, I will say. And I guess we might as well just go to it now. The reason why I'm so interested in Tua in the flex is because in the captain spot, what I'm also seeing is while Jalen Waddle may be the number 2, right, and Devontae Smith may be the number 2, I think their ownership is way too low compared to Tyreek and AJ. Because the reason I'm saying this is we've seen Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle both have nuclear games in comparison to their number 1 wide receiver counterparts in certain situations. To me, this is a situation where points could be scored from everywhere. And look, we know Tyreek is a threat to take home, a 50-yard touchdown. Well, so is Jalen Waddle. And here's something that was very interesting to me in terms of the targets on this team. Now, this is just going to be the past 3 weeks. We know that Waddle was out one of these weeks. He came back in week 4. And both him and Tyreek had 5 targets. Here's why this is getting interesting. Week five, Waddle had 10 targets. Week 6, Waddle had 9 targets. Guess what? Week 5, Tyreek had 9 targets. And week 6, Tyreek had 10 targets. My point is they're pretty much getting the same amount of volume. But Tyreek is going to be getting so much more ownership for good reason. He's slightly more explosive than Waddle. But my point is, I think Waddle is very much more comparable to Tyreek in a showdown situation than I think the public, in terms of the ownership, is doing. And I really want to leverage that tonight. That's kind of why I'm not as high on Tua in the captain, because I want way more exposure to Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. And even if we go to Devontae Smith, believe it or not, he's getting enough work as well. Like, when we look, AJ Brown has cried and he wants more targets. He's got the more stable target share over the past couple of weeks, 14, 13, 8, and 9, where Devontae was 5, 9, 5, and 11. But my point is, in a situation like this, he could very well take one to the house as well. I like these 2 secondary receivers as my primary captain targets. And so that's the reason why I'm pulling back a little bit on Tua. I definitely agree with you. If he spreads it around, he could absolutely nuke the slate. That's just my viewpoint of the slate. TJ, how do you feel about those thoughts?
Agreed, 100%. I'm on the same page with you with Waddle and Devontae Smith. Love those calls. I like adding Tua into that fold as well, just because I think he's too low owned today. But having said that, I really like all of those guys. I think everything we've said so far, you can apply it on FanDuel and DraftKings equally. Maybe even more so on FanDuel, where Devonta Smith is projected for 3 or 4% ownership in the MVP position. And 2 is under-owned there as well. Not quite as heavily, but still going under-owned. And then on DraftKings, I also like AJ Brown just because in the captain position, just because he's the cheapest of those expensive guys, the 2 quarterbacks in Hill. He provides a lot of salary savings from them. If you're kind of looking to stick optimally, you do something single entry. But my favorite captain today on DraftKings Number one, it's Jeff Wilson. There are so many players I want to pay up for in this game. Just so many players I want to pay up for in this game. Number one, I think this is the showdown slate of all of them this year. They're the most upper tier, high price players that I want to try and jam into my lineup of any games this season. Mm-hmm. We got Waddle, we got Tyreek, we got Smith, we got AJ Brown. We got two expensive quarterbacks we want to jam in. We have Raheem Mostert, who's a totally fine play. We have DeAndre Swift, who's a totally fine play. They're tough to get to. And so you look at that in addition to the fact that Jeff Wilson is probably the biggest misprice of any player we've seen on a showdown slate this game, with how much Miami uses two running backs, and he's only $200. Now, I don't think he's going to break the slate and have 20 points and outscore Mostert or anything like that, but I think he will be by far the highest point per dollar player on the slate. And where he's super cheap on DraftKings and we get that multiplier, he's my favorite captain on the slate because I want to play Hurts, I want to play Hill, I want to play AJ Brown, I want to play Tua Tagovailoa. And so with all of those guys in there, one of the ways I can get that to happen is by captaining Jeff Wilson Jr. And so that's going to be my number one thing to do today.
Listen, we've got Doug Harrelson here. Doug, I think this is the right phrase. He says, spicy. I agree. That's spicy, TJ. Listen, I'm all about Jeff Wilson in the flex. I won't have him in the captain, but I understand it. That's spicy. If listen, sir, you take down the Millie with the Jeff Wilson captain, you've earned it. You have earned it. That's very spicy. And I definitely like it. Now, let me get over.
I was tempted, I was tempted to, after I plugged in Jeff Wilson there and I was building the rest of my lineups, do I want to just go Tua, Jalen, Hill, and Brown, and then just see what is left? See if I can make that happen. And I did it, and I looked, and there was, you can do it, absolutely, but I was just looking, and I was like, it's 5,700 remaining. If I could get Goedert, that's perfect, but I don't think I really want one of the kickers. That maybe would raise my floor, but I don't love it for a ceiling today. And that'll also probably be, if anybody else is doing it, that's probably going to be the most duped way of going about it is, why would you do it? It's so you can get all four of those players. So I'm terrifying as it is. I'm actually not playing AJ Brown in my main lineup.
Okay, I understand. Listen,
I hate that. I don't like it for what it's worth.
Oh, I understand because AJ's he's been nuts here over the past few weeks. Let's stay at running back. This is something I want to discuss with you and talk about. One of my favorite running backs today is DeAndre Swift. And the reason why is not necessarily because he's on the field the whole time. He's really only on the field about 60% of the time on average, roughly. Him and Gainwell have about a 60-40 split here over the past few weeks, roughly, especially with no Boston Scott citing hardly, no Rashad Penny citing, obviously, because I think he got hurt earlier. But between Devontae Smith and Kenneth Gainwell, we're seeing, once again, like I said, about a 60-40 split. What we're not seeing, though, in terms of the 60-40 split are the targets. So even though Swift earlier in the season, 2, 3, and 2, the past couple of weeks, 4, 6, and 10 targets, I like the fact that he's getting involved in the pass game. That's really something that's been attractive to me, because when you go over to the Miami Dolphins, what you're going to see is, even for a guy like Raheem Mostert, he's not even getting as much work, generally speaking, in the pass game. And so when you look at the pricing here, we've got Mostert at 9,800, DeAndre Swift at 8K. That, to me, that's very attractive for me on this slate. So if you look at my showdown video, my two top targets were Tua and DeAndre Swift, but it was really more of a game theory play, a little bit of correlation, if you will. So I wanted to talk about this. Swift is someone I have extreme interest in the captain as well, because if for some reason Swift has one of those big games, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns, catches 3 or 4 balls for 50 yards, 40 yards, he's going to be close to hitting optimal here at 8K, because when you look at the wide receiver position, as we talked about, Devontae Smith is 7,400. Jalen Waddle's 86. He's right in between them. And so for me, he's a guy that I want to target as well. Now, I won't have as much exposure to him in the captain as the receivers because I do think in a vacuum they have more upside. But generally speaking, from the flex, Swift is probably the player I want to get overweight on the most in the flex position. I think he gives us really good upside here for the price as compared to Raheem Mostert, who's going to have, Jeff Wilson and probably, who knows what they might do in Miami. Like, yeah, they've got Mostert there and Wilson. Ahmed could hop in.
Philly's a pass funnel too, right? Like that's how you get that, how you move the ball against them is passing. Now, I don't mind Mostert on FanDuel, where you get that touchdown bonus. It's not the point per reception. He's also coming in very low owned over there. So I don't mind getting some Mostert over on FanDuel, even at the MVP position. But on DraftKings, like I'm with you. I like Swift, especially at that discount. Absolutely love him. And then on FanDuel too, he's nice and cheap. Swift, Waddle, and Devontae Smith, all three of those guys are underpriced. So I love them over there as well. I kind of took that off track and I was weaving in Big Hurt's question of your favorite MVPs, contrarian on FanDuel. I think it's one of Waddle, Devonta Smith, and Raheem Mostert. But Devonta Smith, to me, at like maybe 3% ownership, that's like the spiciest way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. So let's talk about that. So your spicy right now is going to be Jeff Wilson. I feel like that's your spicy take of the day where we're going to
DK only, but yes.
Yeah. Absolutely, because of the breakdown for the captain, what it allows you to do at the rest of your positions. Here's kind of my spicy play, if you will, on this particular slate. My spicy play is Dallas Goedert captain. And it's not completely off the reservation. I've got a lot, but that's another reason why I'm not as high on Tua, because I want to get these other guys. And it's not as spicy as it feels until you look and you're like, oh my goodness, he's 3%. Here's why I'm on the Dallas Goedert captain at that particular price, because when I plug him in, I'm still getting really quality opportunity. And if I plug in Swift and Tua, I can still do some miraculous things. Now, when I go back here and I look at the snap counts, I see Dallas Goedert. Outside of last week, he's on the field about 100% of the time. Let's call it 95% on average here, TJ. And then I go and I look at the targets. And when I look at the targets, the Dolphins generated probably because I was trying to look at them. Let me get back to Philly here. But when I look at the targets, Dallas Goedert over the past few weeks, only 1 week one, but I'm going to ignore that. 7, 7, 4, 9, and 8. Whoa. Wait a minute. I've got Devontae Smith, 5, 5, 9, 5, 11. AJ Brown, clearly the alpha here, 6, 14, 13, 8, and 9. But coming in at a close, let's call it 1A, 1B, is Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. So what I can do, I can go even cheaper, TJ. And Dallas Goedert, in my opinion, has more touchdown equity inside the red zone than Devontae Smith. So I can get 6 to 8 catches for 70, 80 yards, possibly 2 touchdown upside from a guy that will allow me to do some other creative things. That's my spicy captain. We've only got him projected around 3%. I think that's about right. Is that going to be optimal, TJ? I don't think so. But for a few lineups, let's say I get him in at 10% captain over the field at 3%. That's kind of my spicy, and that might not be as spicy. Maybe let's call that mild. That's my mild take. That's definitely not as spicy.
I think it's spicy enough. I'm going to be honest. I think that's spicy enough.
Yeah. So I like that. I definitely think Goedert is a guy you want to go overweight on this slate. In the flex, I think we had him around 26-ish%. Let me check on to make sure I'm not misleading the people here. 25% to be exact. I think that's a touch too low. I think he's got equal upside with almost the rest of these plays outside of AJ Brown and Tyreek Hill. But I think he's got equal upside with the opportunities he has.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Okay, now TJ, let's talk through the strategy we've kind of talked about the slate. Let's talk through our strategy for the approach tonight. A lot of times when people hear strategy for Showdown, they're thinking 4-2, 5-1, 3-3. They have those types of thoughts. Just, as an overarching theme for you, what's kind of your read? Because a lot of times when we're doing Showdown, we're trying to tell a story with our lineups. We're trying to tell a story here. And so even if we're expected to go back and forth, there can still be a story that we tell with our lineups. Are we thinking more 4-2 tonight? Are we thinking more 3-3? Because we've got a lot. Both of these offenses have tremendous potential. How are we feeling about our approach here?
I really don't look at the number of players. Maybe I should be doing this more, but I don't look at the number of players all that often. I look at the specific players and I go like, if I have a pass catcher at my captain, maybe I don't need to stack up that team a lot. But if I have a quarterback as captain, aside from maybe somebody like Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, I'm always making sure I have at least 2 to 3 of their pass catchers on that team. And so to me, it's kind of a lot more about the construction of the specific players than how many players per team. My main lineup today is 3-3. And honestly, in a lineup like this, where I expect it to be a close game, the majority of my lineups will be 4-2s or 3-3s.
Okay, understood. Steve, if we can get up the screen share, I want to talk through an approach that I like tonight, just in terms of how it's going to come across. I don't, and ironically, I don't think this is something that the field is going to be heavy on. So I want to get that pulled up. Steve, can we get the screen share up just whenever you get a chance?
Yeah, which site do you want, Chief?
Let's go DraftKings. Yeah. Hey, look, and everybody, clap it up for our illustrious producer, Steve. I mean, just working hard behind the scenes. And don't let Steve fool you. Steve pads his own pockets from time to time. Steve told me about a nice little payoff he got last week. Congrats to Steve again on that one. So I want to kind of go with my idea of construction, TJ, and then we'll go with your idea of construction, because I think it's good for people to see how this can go. This isn't actually going to be optimal tonight for what it's worth because Waddle's so low on. So, Steve, we want to get Waddle in the captain, and then I want to get Tua plugged in as well. And I just want to start there. So for me, TJ, if I'm getting Waddle, I definitely want Tua because I want to handcuff those fantasy points as they continue to rack up. I want our guys to be cruising along here. And so in my mind, the story I'm telling myself is, even though the Dolphins are on the road, Philly's going to have to keep up with the Dolphins, not the other way around. It's going to be a hectic environment there. We know that the Phillies also have playoff baseball that's going to be going on. And by going on, what I really mean is their team is, I mean, they're getting close to wrapping this thing up. So there's a lot of excitement going on in Philly right now. But that game is tomorrow, obviously. But there's still going to be fans galore. So I've got Waddle, I've got Tua. If I'm telling myself, TJ, if the story that I'm painting is that this team is going to have to play catch up, then the one guy that I want to plug in right now, because I feel like it's slight value here, is Dallas Goedert. I want him on the other side of this script because if Hurts is going to be pushing the ball, I want these pass catchers. And so the story that I'm telling myself, TJ, is that I'm going to get Goedert in, and I'm also going to get in Devontae Smith. I have intentions in this particular build of fading Jalen Hurts because I'm saying Hurts in this particular case doesn't pick up that tush-push touchdown, doesn't rush for 80 yards. I'm saying he spreads it around, gets it to his guys, and lets them do the work, while Tua has already been carving them up. So, Steve, if we can, let's plug in Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. I'm going to leave it, and I'll leave it there for now. TJ, what are your thoughts on this? It feels chalky until you realize Jalen Waddle does not have a lot of ownership in the captain. Now, we can still get very spicy here, and I do have a version of spicy because I think I want to add in some of your spice here. But just off the top right now, how do we feel about this particular construction?
I think it's great not having Jalen Hurts and then having Waddle in the captain position. Like that's going to be very non-chalky, and so I think that's a great start to a tournament build.
Yeah, even though it feels chalky looking at it, right? Like this seems like, oh, this is obvious. However, when you look at it, the people are not building this particular way. Now, what I'm going to do now is instead of putting this guy in the cap, I'm going to throw in some of that spice of yours, TJ. So what we talked about was Jeff Wilson being spicy and the captain. Let's go ahead and plug him in the flex now. And we're not going to plug in anymore because we don't want to give out a full lineup. But the point is, when you plug in Jeff Wilson here, what that does now is the possibilities are endless. I mean, we could plug in whoever we wanted. And here's how this all works together, folks, if you didn't know. We've painted a picture here that the Dolphins get out early. Waddle's going nuts. Tua's going nuts. And then at the end of this game, we see a little bit more Jeff Wilson than Raheem Mostert between those tackles. And if Jeff Wilson happens to pick up, 8, 9, 10 rushing attempts for 40 yards and squeezed in a touchdown, all of a sudden, this build looks like a genius build when it was staring us right in the face the whole time. We won't fill out the whole lineup, but I wanted to kind of get that out there. So, folks, this is kind of the way I'm thinking about this particular game tonight. What we're also going to do is we're going to clear that out, Steve, if you can, and then we're going to let TJ kind of talk through his thoughts on DraftKings, and then we can also talk about some FanDuel as well, even though we've kind of talked about it a little bit. TJ, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, so that's the thing is on FanDuel, you don't really have to worry about it as much because it's a very balanced approach build today, and you can't get too crazy with it. But on DraftKings, there are more different types of builds. So on FanDuel, you don't have to worry about it as much as just pick one of the top plays, like you're building your optimal style, your cash. You put in Jalen Hurts or Tyreek Hill at your MVP. If you're building, you're trying to get a little different, you use Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, or Raheem Mostert at your MVP, something like that. Then that's really the only differences you got to do over there. On DraftKings, where you have the ability to do this Jeff Wilson style build at the captain position, this is what I like to do, and I'm doing it in my main build today. I get to play whoever I want now. Jeff Wilson is in the captain. We look at our remaining salary, and it's $9,940. So I can basically do whatever the heck I want. I only need one moderate salary saver now.
And so, let me squeeze this in real quick, TJ, before you finish up your thoughts. Brad asked a question here. Do you guys think Hurts and Swift bring negative correlation? Not necessarily, because Hurts can rush for touchdowns. On the surface, yes. Below the surface, I think the answer is no, because Swift is involved in the passing game. Hurts can obviously throw touchdowns. Hurts can hit his ceiling without getting a rushing touchdown, for what it's worth. That's a part of his ceiling, but it's not the only way he can get there in a shootout. So I don't think they negatively correlate, especially in Showdown. I'm not as concerned about that in Showdown at all.
We also got some people asking about Braxton Berrios and Durham Smythe, both of those guys in the flex.
Yeah, we'll get
even in the captain. I like both of them as cheap salary saving options today. I don't necessarily need them in a Jeff Wilson Jr. at captain lineup, but when I'm not doing that, absolutely, those are two of my most used salary savers today are Braxton Berrios and Durham Smythe. Love both of them. Also, Butthole Jenkins asking who's my feel it in your plums play of the night. It's the guy we're playing at captain right now, Jeff Wilson Jr. All we need is for this dude to vulture a touchdown or catch 2 or 3 passes, and all of a sudden we are cooking because, like I said, almost 10K per position. I can play Jalen Hurts. I can play Tua. I can play Tyreek Hill. I can play A.J. Brown. And my favorite combo of that group, I think, is going to be Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Hurts. I am kind of torn. Like I was thinking maybe I just want to roll with instead of Tua Tagovailoa, put Jalen A.J. Brown in there so I can get everything I want. But in spirit of getting a little bit different, just in case there are a couple other people like doing this Jeff Wilson captain thing, I think they're going to have the A.J. Brown in there. And so I'm actually going with Tua, and I'm going with Devonta Smith or Waddle. Smith or Waddle is like the next guy that I want to choose between, because they're going to be lower owned than A.J. Brown is going to come in. And I actually think lower. I think they're going to be quite a bit lower owned than A.J. Brown. I think more than that 7 to 8% that we're projecting right now. I like picking one of those two. and then, or essentially 2 of the 3 of DeAndre Swift, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle as like my last 2 positions there. You are muted.
Yeah, I know. I had to unmute myself.
Yeah, I was already blurting it out as soon as I saw the hand go up.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I like that construction, and thank you, Steve, so much for pulling that in for us. All right, so let's go through. We know we're going to play both quarterbacks. In terms of the running backs, I think we understand that we are going to play Mostert, Swift, probably going to have some Jeff Wilson. I did want to touch on Kenneth Gainwell. Once again, I want to go back to mention they do have a 60-40 split. I do think Gainwell should have some ownership in your builds. Like, he's getting 40% of the snap share. That means a couple catches, a couple rushing attempts. If he happens to come in at the right time and falls into the end zone, then Kenneth Gainwell is going to be, a guy that can get you around 10 points in this game, and that could prove valuable. I'm going to go ahead and move to wide receiver, where we've already talked about the ball. We haven't talked as much about Tyreek, but I think Tyreek is an obvious play. I can't advocate fading Tyreek because we know his upside. He doesn't have to have 10 catches to have a monster game. He could have 5 catches for 150 and 2 touchdowns. Like that's just who he is. So I can't advocate fading Tyreek even at 12K tonight. I do like AJ Brown quite a good bit. He's shown some nice upside. We've already talked about the wide receiver 2s and Waddle and Smith, which are guys that we really like. People have mentioned Braxton Berrios, and we've got him projected at 14% at 2.4K. That's a guy that I know you like as well, TJ. When we look at Braxton Berrios, one of the things that we will see, he's on the field, let's call it 40% of the time, 52% week 1, 33% week 2, 51 week 3, 49 week 4, 37 and 30. Let's call it 40% on average, just as an average for right now. I'm just kind of spitballing there, so please don't take that as being a complete fact. I'm just kind of spitballing, looking at what I have. And he's not going to get a lot of targets. But what he does have is speed. And TJ, how many times have we come on here on a Sunday and talked about one of these random guys? And I always use this guy as an example. When the Cowboys are on the slate, you always need to have exposure to a guy like Kevontae Turpin that can run a kickback or catch a big touchdown pass on his only target. A guy like Marvin Mims, those type guys, you need exposure to them, because while they may only get 1 or 2 targets, those 1 or 2 targets that they get could be game-breaking type targets. So when I look at his targets on the team, once again, like I said, you're not going to see him getting a whole bunch of targets. 5, 3, 2, 6, 2, 2. Had a big week 4, but only 2 targets the past couple weeks. But I still think it's worth it for 2.4K to get him into your builds. Then we've got Zacchaeus, Claypool, who's coming into the mix for Miami, Britton Covey, who returns kicks, and then Cedric Wilson. Do any of these cheaper guys, do you have any interest in any of these guys?
Not really. Like Olamide Zacchaeus, I like a little bit. Julio Jones isn't going to be fully in the fold yet. But Braxton Berrios and Zacchaeus are going to be the only 2 I'd really go for here.
Yeah. Let me say this. If you're in the millie.
Cedric's fine in the millie, I think.
No, well, that's what I'm going to say. If you're in the millie, I think you sprinkle in some Ced Wilson. I think you sprinkle in Claypool as well. Like, if you're in the millie, I think you need sprinkles of Wilson, Claypool, Zacchaeus. You'd hate to build 100 lineups and not have them in 3 or 4, and then everything else is the nuts, and they just happen to catch a 40-yard touchdown and you don't have them. You'd be sick looking at those lineups saying, I got everybody except those guys. I think you need a sprinkle. If you're in any type of high stakes or single entry, 3-entry max, I don't think they're as important. That's getting real aggressive to do that. All right, we're going to go over the tight end. We talked about Dallas Goedert a ton, like him a ton. Durham Smythe, Tanner Conklin, these guys. I'm not as into these cheap tight ends tonight, but I do like Durham Smythe. He's a guy that's already involved in the offense. When you look at the snap count, he's on the field. Let's call it 75-ish% of the time, because he's had some weird weeks in there, but 100%, 97, 36, 85, 81, 66. Some of those have been blowouts where they just pulled everybody. So let's just say he's their primary guy. And then when you look at the targets, 7-3-1-4-0-1. So no consistency, but we don't care about that for Showdown. This could be the game where he has 7 targets and have 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, and we're sitting pretty. So there we go with Durham Smythe. I think we're going to be in agreement on him. Are we okay there, TJ?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, we're moving over to what I call the most controversial position in Showdown, and that's the defense. I don't play defenses hardly ever. So much variance. I feel like I can win without defense in this type of game. Defenses are getting full fades for me tonight. TJ, how about you?
Not a single defense in any of my lineups. I'm running about 10 to 15. I'm on, to be perfectly candid, I'm hand building more as we speak. But I'm not getting any of either defense.
Okay. All right. And then last but not least, we've got the kickers. And I don't mind the kickers. I do think Jason Sanders at 5,200, that might be a little bit extreme. Like that feels a little bit, excuse me, too rich for my blood tonight. I think that's, I mean, it could be a high-scoring game if both of these guys kick 3 field goals and 3 extra points. I mean, it could very well be worth it if they hit a couple 50 yards or 40 yards. If he hits a 50, 40, and a 30, that's 12 points plus 3. I mean, he's getting up to 15 fantasy points. I get it. I still think 5,200 is that's a little high for kicker, but once again, in a high-scoring game, I don't hate it. How do you feel about the kickers tonight?
Not getting to a ton of them. I have each kicker in one lineup, I believe, just because they work as last pieces. I'm not targeting them at all because I do think this is going to be a more touchdown-focused game. But if they fall as like, I got the salary and I don't really want to punt all the way down to a Berrios or a Smythe or even a Gainwell, then I'm fine with the kicker.
I have to keep unmuting myself. Well, listen, Steve, I think we've hit it. I don't see any more questions. I did answer a question in the NFL chat, so hopefully they caught the answer to that. And we're going to put a few more seconds back into everyone's night so they can continue to construct those lineups and crush them down. TJ, any final thoughts?
No, I think we crushed it, my man. Good to hang out with you as per usual. We got a fun little slate here.
Well, listen, as we close this thing out, I think since we got through it early, I can't tell you guys how valuable the NBA stuff is going to be at RG this season. Get the NBA yearly premium sale. Check this out, folks. NBA DFS is back. It's here. I mean, you're going to wake up tomorrow, you're one day away. There's an amazing suite of premium offerings here at RG, RotoGrinders. For a limited time, you can lock in a full season of NBA Premium at a $50 discount. You're going to get the lineup HQ access, up-to-minute premium projections and ownership, and the fantasy pick'em tool, which is going to be exceptional for all of you in the Prize Picks, Underdog, Sleeper, etc., and tons more. Check out the link in the description. Get the $50 off and keep stacking money during both seasons. We are excited for NBA season. Let's close it out on that. TJ, any thoughts about the NBA?
I'm excited for the NBA, man. I think like Victor Wembanyama is one of the craziest. I mean, no, he is the craziest prospect I've ever seen. I'm excited for this season. I'm doing a couple season-long stuff, and I'm going to try and pick him really early. And then, obviously, you got Dame to the Bucks. You got Drew Holiday to the Celtics. The East is getting a lot stronger, and so it's going to be a really, really fun season. I was just grimacing at the end there because I saw there was a $50 single entry that was going quite. There's quite a bit of overlay, and I was like, I'm just going to throw my Jeff Wilson team in this one too. And I accidentally put in my AJ Brown captain team as it. And so technically my main lineup today ended up being an AJ Brown captain and not and my second main lineup is a Jeff Wilson, but that was accidental.
Yeah. Well, listen, no problem at all, TJ. Hopefully you take it down. Folks, I'm Chief. This has been the Sunday Night Football Pre-Lock Show. Don't forget to check out the NBA content. We will see you back here next Sunday.